Hello and welcome back to SpinCycleLIVE. I'm your host, Nathan Hale. And do we have the stories for you? Happy Monday. Happy January 6th. Happy appointment day / certification day for the President and Vice President of the United States. It's been a great day so far, I have to say. And I hope you are doing good. Here in the lovely city of Kansas City, Missouri, we are all snowed in. So I have the great opportunity to spend literally all my time with you. There's no other place I would rather be than with you all, my lovely audience. Few things to begin with. We are now streaming on Instagram. So if you have an Instagram, go and follow me on Instagram at HomoNation. We're also on YouTube, Rumble, X, any platform you want to watch us on. We are there now. Same username everywhere. It's great. So anywhere you want to see the show, we got you covered. Some other little pieces of housekeeping. It's been a great start to the new year. We got some amazing things ahead of us. I had a thought of starting to post on TikTok, but the closer we get to the TikTok ban, quote unquote, the more it's looking like it's actually going to go through and happen. So I'm kind of sitting in my hands for a little bit to see what happens there. But definitely go follow on Instagram. Regardless of where you're following me on, where you're following the show on, you will continue to see that content will be posted everywhere on all of our different platforms. Aside from Rumble is going to stay just long form content. But if you're interested in seeing that short form content, it'll be coming out Instagram, X / Twitter, as well as YouTube Shorts. So be on the lookout for all that. But with that, let's get into our first story today, which of course is the presidential appointment. So Trump's election win has been officially certified by Congress, which is great. 312 to 226. Everything went smoothly. It took about half an hour. If you didn't watch on C-SPAN like I did, because I'm a nerd, there were no hiccups or anything. If you're not familiar with how the presidential certification process works, basically, we all voted, or hopefully we all voted for Trump on November 5th, right? And all those votes go to the Electoral College to be voted on. They met a few weeks ago. Everyone's Electoral College votes went as we were assuming they were going to go. 312 to Trump, 226 to Kamala Harris, the coconut lady. All the states certified their ballots, no issues there. And then today, all of those state ballots went to the federal government, to Congress, to be certified by them. So the vice president, who's also the president of the Senate, oversees that whole process. So Kamala Harris was actually in charge of overseeing her own election day loss and certifying the votes for Donald Trump, which is kind of funny, in my opinion, that it's kind of poetic justice if you think about it, that she ran probably the worst political campaign in modern history and has to say with a straight face that she lost and Donald Trump won. So that was great. If you want to see something kind of entertaining, go watch the C-SPAN live stream on it. It was interesting to see them, rattle off all their different states and the electoral votes and see people clap. It was great seeing the Democrats just absolutely scowling every time Trump got any votes. And none of them stood up to clap for Trump. But none of the Republicans stood up to clap for anything that was Democrat or Kamala Harris related, which I think is, if one side wants to be that way, the other side should be also. So glad to see it. But like I said, no hiccups. Not that I thought there was going to be any hiccups, but you never know. And especially after January 6, 2021, I was interested to see what was going to happen. And I'm glad that no shenanigans were pulled from the Democrats. I'm glad that no shenanigans were pulled by the Republicans either. But good things either way. So everything legally is going in the direction of Trump. He has for sure gotten the votes that he needs. And That's great. So we have a couple weeks until January 20th when the official inauguration begins and Trump officially becomes the 47th president of the United States. But for right now, sit back, relax. We did it, folks. Take a few more weeks to chill out, and then we're going to be fighting hard again for another 4 years until the next election, and we're going to be fighting even harder for 2026, right? So let's move on to another major piece of news. Justin Trudeau has resigned as the Prime Minister of Canada. I didn't believe it. I did not believe it. I know there were rumors circling about that he was going to be resigning, but I couldn't believe it. Apparently, he came out and spoke, and his speech literally flew away out of his hands, which I don't know. I didn't know that Mother Nature is so pissed off at him. But apparently she was to blow his speech out of his hand. Even after he enacted all those carbon taxes and stuff to save the environment, she was still pissed off at him. She's like, no, you don't get to read your speech. But his speech flew off. He resigned. This is an interesting move. So Canada has become a hellhole in the past couple of years, right? It's totally changed from how it was even 10 years ago. And the Liberal government has just driven it into the ground. So in case you're wondering, the Liberal government of Canada, the Liberal Party just in general, was a centrist party in Canada up until about a decade ago when Justin Trudeau took over. And it has just morphed into this socialist apparatus in Canada, right? And there's always been a socialist party in Canada for the most part, right? And they've just kind of merged together and made this one like blended homogenous blob of just awfulness and negativity, right? That's just driven Canada into the ground. So really disappointing that you have one guy who comes along who just totally blows up a party in Canada, but that's Justin Trudeau for you. So you might be thinking, well, when are elections happening, right? When is the next election? If he's been around for 10 years, when is he officially going to be gone, right? Well, elections probably will not happen in Canada until October. So about 10 months from now, right? My feeling is that he is resigning from his position as prime minister to try and run cover for the party as a whole versus hopefully I think what he is thinking is going to happen is that elections happening in Canada are going to be a referendum on Justin Trudeau and he'll take the hit, right? And he's hoping that people will see that he's gone and think that the Liberal government is back to what they remember him being, and not what he is now, right? Remembering what the Liberal Party used to be, which was more of a centrist party, and keep some people in power, right? I hope the Canadian people do not have the wool pulled over their eyes here, because that's not the case at all. They're not savable. Their party is dead. They become nothing more than socialists. And I hope that the polling numbers continue to show, because the polling numbers right now show that 95% of the Liberals are going to lose their seats. And it's just going to be a complete blowout by the Conservatives in Canada. And the Conservatives in Canada, the news arms in Canada are constantly calling Pierre Poilievre, which I think is how you pronounce his name, who's the current leader of the Canadian Conservative Party, right-wing, fascist, nothing more than a Canadian MAGA, right? A Canadian Make America Great Again, Make Canada Great Again. That's not true. The Canadian Conservative Party is actually kind of a centrist party as well. They're not even like super far right or anything by American standards. So I think that he's going to do a great job up in Canada. Pierre will be the next prime minister starting hopefully in October, right, when those elections happen. So we'll be sure to keep you updated on all that. But a quick recap on what's happened in Canada over the past few years. I mean, you've had a free speech in Canada has totally been abolished, right? So that started with news regulations, right? So if you're a Canadian citizen, right, you cannot see certain news outlets on certain platforms, right? You're only really seeing state-issued news, depending on where those platforms are, right? So you have that. You have your free speech rights been taken away because you're now being compelled by the government to use people's preferred pronouns. This is what happened to Jordan Peterson on why he quit working in the universities up there, because they were forcing him to use students' preferred pronouns, which I don't really have an issue using people's preferred pronouns. I think that conservatives kind of blown that up a little bit too much. I don't mind when it's my choice and we're being respectful about it and we're having an honest conversation. But to say the government has to tell me what I have to say, right? Completely ridiculous. So that's happened in Canada. Another thing, you have this bill going through now that will likely get passed that will allow the Canadian government to pull people in front of a magistrate judge in Canada and be put on house arrest for up to a year for saying, anything potentially hateful to another person online, not even in person. So imagine criticizing someone's clothing, right? Their gender expression, which in Canada, gender expression goes all the way down to the clothes that people wear. Imagine criticizing someone's clothes in Canada, being brought before a judge and being put on house arrest for a year. That's really scary. That is a complete disruption, completely destroyed free speech rights in Canada. So hopefully the Conservative government will be able to undo a lot of that. But we'll see. We'll keep you updated. I'll be interested to see how the polling results in Canada go on now that Trudeau has resigned. Because it was kind of a referendum on Justin Trudeau. And I hope the Canadian people are smart enough to see through what is happening right now in the Liberal Party and do not vote these people back into power, right? We need a majority conservative government in Canada to undo a lot of the BS that's happened over the past 10 years and say, no. You will not go any further. We are bringing Canada back to the great country it once was, and we're going to make it prosperous in the future for future generations. We're going to allow people to buy houses. We're going to unleash Canadian energy, right? We're going to become really strong allies again with the United States and other governments in the world, right? Canada used to be a super strong country. Now they're the laughing stock of the world. They might even be more laughed upon than the United States is right now. And I'm constantly calling the United States the laughing stock of the world for some of our elected officials, right? But I digress. That's all I have to say about Justin Trudeau. And good riddance. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. So our next story today, we're going to pop over to Costco. Costco is doubling down on its DEI efforts. So DEI, for those of you who don't know, stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So apparently Costco is doubling down on this. I've canceled my Costco membership, by the way. I said sayonara Costco about a month ago. But I'm not glad to see that they're doubling down on their DEI efforts. But what does that mean? I read through this Daily Wire article and I didn't get a whole lot from it. I wouldn't talk about it more in a broad context than what exactly this article is. I'm just using Costco kind of as my scapegoat to get there. But I'm assuming that Costco has hiring processes that favor hiring certain races or minorities over others, right? Or maybe it's a promotion process. Whatever it is, it can't be good. Anytime you see DEI after a word, you rearrange the letters, it just spells die, right? Companies die from DEI as far as I'm concerned. And it's really sad to see a company like Costco falling for this, especially when I would argue the majority of Costco customers are Midwestern or rural individuals buying stuff wholesale for their families. Most of them probably lean a little bit more conservative than your average consumer out there. And I hope that consumers see this and start pushing back against stuff like this. So I'll just read kind of the intro of this article. So this is from Daily Wire. So is the anti-DEI movement losing momentum? Costco certainly isn't a fan of it. So several days ago, the retail giant sparked headlines for a robust defense of its diversity, equity, and inclusion policies in response to an anti-DEI shareholder proposal from the National Center of Public Policy Research. Quote, "Our focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion is to enhance our culture and the well-being of the people whose lives we influence." Costco announced in its response, quote, "Our efforts at diversity, equity, and inclusion remain and reinforce what everyone at our company and the importance of creating opportunities for all." So I believe what happened was a shareholder was pissed off at the DEI efforts that Costco is doing, and they made a shareholder proposal to bring this to a vote and talk about the next meeting. I'm not super sure. You can go read this full article for yourself and make of it what you will. But I think this article it brings up a good point, that DEI is slowly falling out of the zeitgeist. If we look at kind of how a lot of these woke policies happen, we've had a good 20 years of buildup to all of this woke BS happening. And ever since, these past couple of years with Trump really campaigning hard and a lot of conservative voices really coming to the forefront, we've seen it totally drop off. We've seen companies who have just been kind of regular, normal, sane individuals, right, running their businesses for the betterment of their customers, really be promoted to the forefront, right? And we've seen a lot of companies end their DEI BS because they realize it's not making them money. It's not making them look good in the public eye, right? I wonder how many people will actually be ending their memberships over Costco's DEI efforts. But, it kind of goes back to the Daily Wire itself, in that they now have a whole merchandise store. They have Jeremy's Razors. They have the chocolate company, right? They have a whole streaming service, right? And their whole push for that was, we're making this content because we don't hate our customers, right? So whenever you see DEI attached to a company now, right, they hate you as a customer, as far as I'm concerned, right? They don't want you shopping at their stores unless you believe their mindset, right? If you're an employee there, they care about some of their employees more than others based on qualities that they cannot change about themselves, such as their race or sexuality or sexual orientation, right? So in conclusion, don't give your money to companies that hate you, right? But that's all I got to say about Costco. And if I see more on the subject, I'll be sure to keep you updated. But let's move forward to Wisconsin. So Governor Evers' plan to let Wisconsin voters repeal and create state laws meets GOP resistance for good means, right? Citizens should not be voting on a referendum scale for legislation, as far as I'm concerned. In almost every case, it should be very limited, right? I'm not a big fan of ballot measures for the most part. I'll tell you why, right? There's been a push by some groups to push legislation back to people as much as possible to get them to vote on everything, right? But it completely dismisses the reason why we have legislatures in the first place and why we have a representative government, because we elect representatives to go and voice our thoughts and opinions to a smaller group and vote on things on a case-by-case basis. We elect them and we pay them to do this job in the hopes that they will be more knowledgeable about the issues affecting the state and know what they're actually passing in this legislation, right? Versus your average everyday American could not possibly be an expert on a lot of these ballot measures. So when you go to vote, to throw 10, 20, 30 ballot measures at someone is ridiculous. I mean, how can you effectively vote on that? It's kind of what happened in Missouri recently. We used Missouri as an example. Missouri had an abortion ballot that was on our ballots, right? And the whole purpose of that was to open up and codify abortion in the state of Missouri's constitution. Now that ballot measure unfortunately passed. But I believe it passed because people were unaware of what was actually in that piece of legislation, because the whole thing wasn't actually listed on the ballot, right? So what people saw on the ballots were that Missouri abortion rights would be codified in the state's constitution. And that was basically it, right? What they didn't see was that ballot measure that got passed would protect abortionists if they screwed up and harmed their patients, right? So if you get an abortion now in Missouri and they screwed up and they affect you or harm you in any way, right? You cannot go and sue those doctors for medical malpractice. They're now protected by that. Another thing is it codifies abortion up until the time of birth. So you can abort your child just days or even a day before you actually give birth, until it's literally coming out of you. You can choose to terminate that pregnancy. That was not on the ballots in Missouri. So Missouri voters did not know what they were getting themselves into when they voted yes on that ballot measure, right? The same issue is going to happen if you start asking voters more and more and more ballot measures, right, to make a decision on this. They don't have all the facts in front of them. They don't understand everything that's at stake when they vote yes or no on these ballot measures. So certain issues I think are fine if they're very basic. Missouri had another ballot measure that had to do with, I believe, gambling in the state, where it was going to send gambling money into the police pension fund or into educators' pension fund, something like that. That was very clear. That's fine for a ballot measure, right? It's very basic. It doesn't really affect Missourians all that much if it passes or fails, right? So ballot measures like that, I understand, but you cannot put ballot measures onto ballots that are this intense, or several that are very intense, and not give voters all the facts. So let's go back to Wisconsin. So Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers plans to let voters repeal and create state laws without legislative involvement, met opposition on Monday from the Republican leader of the state Senate, who signaled that the idea is likely to be rejected for the second time. So they tried to pull this before. And the reason why this guy, this old bag of bones, wants to do this is because he's a Democrat. The Wisconsin legislature is controlled by Republicans, and Republicans have been kind of avoiding his office by putting things directly into the Wisconsin state constitution and avoiding his signature altogether. Because in Wisconsin, you do not need to have a governor's signature to approve constitutional measures, right? If you have a certain number of support in the state house, all right? So this is kind of his fight back and that, where he's saying, all right, fine, if you're going to avoid going through me to pass legislation, I'm going to avoid going through you to pass legislation. We'll just give more and more and more ballot measures to the voters. So Evers' plan comes the same day the legislature kicks off its 2-year session. Republicans may remain in control, but their majority is at its narrowest since they took over in 2011. That means the dynamic between the legislature and Evers entering his 7th year as governor will largely remain as it has been. Republicans must approve everything Evers wants done. So still, the Democrat Evers is reviving a plan to weaken the powers of the legislature that Republicans already previously rejected. Evers said on Friday that the state budget he plans to unveil next month will include a mandate that legislators take up a constitutional amendment allowing voters to petition for ballot proposals to repeal state statutes and create new ones. Evers made a similar proposal in 2022 for voters to repeal the state's 1849 abortion ban, but Republicans killed the plan. So Wisconsin is one of 24 states that do not provide a way for people to reject or enact statutes outside of the legislative process. Evers said Republicans have been ignoring the will of the people by refusing to legalize marijuana, all right, repeal the abortion ban, implement gun control measures, and increase funding to public schools. Instead, he said that the GOP has been enacting policies through constitutional amendments denying voters a voice. So I laugh whenever I hear voters don't have a voice because the legislature is doing stuff, right? The people elected the legislature to do that very job, to legislate, right? And if that's the way that they see fit to pass legislation, that's the way you should do it. And if Wisconsin voters do not like that, they don't have to re-elect that legislature, right? So, if you're a Republican in Wisconsin, you take that risk that you might not be reelected if you're going to avoid the people that way, but clearly they feel like they're comfortable doing that, and they've kept the majority all this time. So clearly the people don't have an issue with it, right? And I also laugh a little bit too, because it's not that the governor is wanting to pass any sort of common sense legislation here. I mean, we see that he's wanting to legalize marijuana, repeal an abortion ban, implement gun control measures, and increase funding to public schools. I don't really have an issue with increasing funding to public schools. I think that our public education is in dire need of help. And, you know, I don't really have an issue with public education. I think it's a good thing to have. But I'm not a fan of legalizing marijuana. I don't think that really helps anyone, unless you're one of the rare cases that you're in chronic pain, or you have a debilitating illness, whatever it is. But just for regular people who smoking weed, I'm not in favor of that. At least not in my backyard. I think this is where like localism really comes into play here. Is if downtown Kansas City wants to let people smoke weed all they want and turn to a weed city, they can go for it. But here in the suburbs, I don't want it here. No thanks. So repealing abortion bans, like I said, I'm not pro-abortion person, so I don't want this legislation. Clearly, Wisconsin isn't either, because they keep electing a Republican majority to run the state, right? Implementing gun control measures, I'm not a fan of gun control either. These are some very radical things that the governor is wanting to push in that state, and I'm not in favor of it, So continuing on, so Ever said that Republican lawmakers are going to continue to try and legislate by constitutional amendment. Then they should give Wisconsinites the same opportunity that 26 other states have, which is, voting things on a ballot measure. And this goes back to like what I said before. It's the legislature. This is their job to legislate. And they see fit to do it through a constitutional amendment, then they should do so, right? There are plenty of other states that are doing this, right? And if you're in a state that has a Democrat supermajority, you don't really have an issue, or a Republican supermajority. You don't have an issue either here. But if you have a state like Wisconsin that's divided between their legislature and their executive, where you have a governor that's extremely radical, just like Tim Walz is extremely radical, they're just one state over. You have to find other ways to help people out a little bit. And that's what the Republican legislature is working to do. They're trying to help Wisconsin as much as they can by avoiding the governor's office and doing their job. They're not doing anything wrong here. This is allowed through the Wisconsin legislature, through the Wisconsin constitutional process, right? They're not breaking any laws. They're not doing anything they shouldn't be doing. In a perfect world, would legislation go through the governor's office and then be enacted into law after that? Absolutely. But not when you're trying to pass legislation that is actually helping people and you have a governor who's refusing to pass it, right? Or will only pass legislation that's super radical and has a whole bunch of pork in it that the people don't actually want. So finishing out this article, Republicans have asked voters to approve 7 amendments since 2010, according to data from the University of Wisconsin's Law School State Democracy Research Initiative. My God, what a name. So voters ratified 3 in 2024 alone, including 2 in April, to restrict use of private money in election administration, and 1 in November that prohibits foreign nationals from voting. Republicans could put another amendment to voters in April's election that would cement voters' identification requirements. This is all great. So you have one party who's trying to push legislation that keeps foreign nationals from voting, that requires voter ID, and that restricts private money in elections. All good things, right? And you have another party that wants to enact gun control bans, repeal abortion laws, and legalize marijuana, right? Which side would you rather be on, is my question to you all. So that's all I got to say about Wisconsin. If you live in Wisconsin, God bless you. I could never live up there. Too cold. I'm snowed in here for one day and I'm losing my mind. But, Wisconsinites, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you have to deal with this ugly old man who looks like he's about to fall over from being so frail. Last piece of news. So This comes from Fox News. This is entitled, Trump presses GOP to swiftly send one powerful bill for his signature ASAP. So Speaker Johnson has indicated that the House will aim to pass a large measure in early April. So President-elect Donald Trump is urging congressional Republicans to send him, quote, one powerful bill as swiftly as possible once he takes office later this month. Quote, members of Congress are getting to work on one powerful bill that will bring our country back and make it greater than ever before. We must secure our border, unleash American energy, and renew the Trump tax cuts, which were the largest in history. But we'll make it even better. No tax on tips, Trump declared on a Truth Social post. It will be made up with tariffs and much more from countries that have taken advantage of the U.S. for years. So Johnson, who described it as one big up or down vote, which can save the country, noted that he thinks the measure, which will tackle various issues, will also address the debt ceiling. So it's one big beautiful bill that has everything that Trump wants in it. So I'll be holding out my opinions on this until I actually see what's in the bill. I'm not usually a fan of large pieces of legislation that cover a whole bunch of different issues, right? In my opinion, the best legislation is simple, short, concise, easy to read, and any average American can interpret it, and it's not vague, right? That's good legislation, in my opinion. This seems like it's going to be a humongous bill that covers a whole lot of different issues that are going to be very complicated. Usually I'm not in favor of that. I'm interested to see what's actually inside of it. Hopefully it's all good stuff. I'm thinking that they're wanting to get something like this passed so that Trump has a lot of new things enacted right away that can be worked on at the executive level, that he doesn't have to wait in Congress to pass every single thing individually, right? It can just be done in one giant bill. Like I said, usually I'm not in favor of omnibus bills. Hopefully this one's good and not filled with a bunch of pork. But we will wait and see, and I will be sure to update you all about this when information becomes available on it. But with that, folks, that is the end of our show today. Don't have much else to tell you. Stay warm out there if you're in a state that just got absolutely smacked by the snowstorm that went through, like Missouri did. Stay inside. Don't go driving around. Hopefully you got plenty of toilet paper and bread inside your house. You're not going to die. But the worst of it is over. Now, hopefully, God bless all the snow plowers out there. God bless all the people who are working to keep the power grid alive, keep things from freezing over, and keep all of our houses heated through the winter. If you are someone who lives in a southern state, I'm very envious of you right now. I hope that you appreciate your warmth. I know it's been a little chilly down there, but I'd much rather have 40 degrees days than a foot and a half snow outside. But that's about it. Like I said, have a great rest of your Monday. Hope you enjoyed the show today. Please give me a follow over on Twitter at HomoNation. If you're watching on Instagram, give us a follow there. I'm also on YouTube as well as on Rumble. You can follow our Rumble channel at the SpinCycleLIVE. Also follow our official Twitter/X page for the show at SpinCycleLIVE. But with that, I have been your host, Nathan Hale. Thank you so much for spending the past 40 or so minutes with me. Hope you enjoyed the show. If you have any questions or comments for me, you can send me a DM on Twitter. I'm always happy to read them. Anything specific, I'm happy to get back to you about. I always read through my DMs, so happy to interact with some of you if I can. If you have any questions or thoughts for the show, anything you want me to cover, send me a DM. I'm happy to look at it and might make it onto the show. But with that, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your Monday. We will see you back here on Wednesday, same time, 5 p.m. Eastern time, for the next installment of SpinCycleLIVE. Thank you so much, and I will see you all on Wednesday. Peace out.